Welcome, everyone. We'll be getting started in just a moment, but feel free to take a little time and see your friends that are here together in the Zoom meeting. As I often say, we have to make a very particular effort to feel part of community. It's easy to get caught in ideas of isolation, being alone, and it really goes to this basic principle in the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha. And it really matters what we've been studying lately in terms of mindfulness of breathing, and then just generally this path of awakening, of tranquility and insight. And that principle is, it really matters what we pay attention to. So as much as almost any supporting cause for happiness, we really want to own responsibility for this seemingly insignificant act. That act is what we're paying attention to and how we're paying attention. And so every moment of our waking life, the mind, either out of habit or because we care and we're acting out of wisdom, every moment we're paying attention. And the relevant question in terms of what we might be setting in motion in our lives is, well, what am I paying attention to? And with what attitude, what qualities of mind am I paying attention to that object? And, the question is, what am I setting in motion? When I pay attention to this in this way, what kind of seeds are getting planted in my heart? Are those the seeds I want to plant in my heart? And when we gather like this, any gathering of human beings around our spiritual practice, especially in terms of early Buddhism, this lineage that we practice in at Common Ground, we often remind ourselves, we come back to this truth that there is suffering. There's suffering here in my own heart, and when I choose to look and feel, I see that there's suffering out there in other beings, in their hearts. Very real suffering, as real as anything is real. And we let that in, because to not acknowledge the truth of suffering means we're operating in some kind of disconnected way, which means we're contributing to suffering. And sometimes we begin by just acknowledging the land we're sitting on right now. We're coming from different places here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. We're on this piece of earth, originally settled and taken care of by the Dakota people and other indigenous folks before them and with them. And as we and I'm especially sensitive, having just done a little study about some of the pipelines that are controversial in Minnesota right now for those who are out of state. And of course, the pipelines cutting through treaty land. And I did a little bit of a deeper dig about these, broken treaties that our lives are based on, our lives here in Minnesota are based on, and probably most places in this country, and in North America generally. And it isn't the only sort of reverberation of injustice and genocide and suffering. There are so many layers that our life here on this planet, all of our lives on this planet, we're basically the fruit of so many injustices, so much suffering, so many wounds. And we don't bring this to mind to depress ourselves. It's liberating to be real and to be honest about our human existence, and not to pretend, something that's idealistic or hopeful. but just to be grounded. One of my teachers, Sayadaw U Tejaniya, makes this point when he was sort of in a provocative way challenging us, are the Buddha's teachings optimistic? Are they pessimistic? And he really waited until we aligned ourselves with one view or the other, like optimistic or pessimistic. And then he said, no, it's neither. These teachings, this path is neither optimistic nor pessimistic. It's realistic. And I think that's the stance or the grounding we want whenever we gather around these teachings to practice being more awake in life. We want to have that realistic grounding, which means we have to wake up to what we tend to ignore, that what our lives are built on. So with that grounding and with just the grounding of being in our bodies, because in a way, the way our body feels this morning, it's the reverberation of everything that came before. All the wounds and all the ways we overuse the body or underuse the body, it shows up like this morning. This is the natural result of the body having lived the way that it's lived, been fed the way that it's been fed, right? Now, are we willing to have an honest, realistic, kind connection with the body? Because that might be the one thing we can do that's healing, excuse me, and liberating. And we'll begin our sit by taking a few longer, deeper breaths in and out. Taking all the time you need to fill the lungs, all the time you need to empty the lungs. And do that deep breathing several times in a gentle way, but really exploring what it feels like to fill the lungs, what it feels like to empty the lungs. And eventually, we allow the breathing to continue on its own. It's nice not to have to control the breathing process. And we've been learning this set of instructions, the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha's meditation instructions, mindfulness of breathing instructions. So the Buddha invites us to establish mindfulness to the fore. We are remembering to recognize that this experience of the body sitting, this experience of the breathing body is being known, being felt. Here and now, breathing in is being known. Here and now, breathing out is being known or being felt. We're cultivating a taste for what is really ordinary and simple. We are remembering to recognize breathing in, remembering to recognize the sensations of breathing out. And in persisting in this way, we're letting go of whatever else the knowing mind might attend to. And simply tracking the ordinary experience, the ordinary physicality of breathing in and breathing out. And this simple thing is quite radical, to allow everything else just to fall into the background and to choose to be interested in this ordinary experience of breathing in and breathing out, and to really relax, because breathing in and breathing out is a natural process. It doesn't require mental oversight or any kind of parental energy. And be willing to begin again and again. We're really learning what it is to persist at this simple task. So it's a training in non-distraction, and we're using the ordinary experience, the physicality of breathing in and out, as a way to train in non-distractedness, the continuity of present moment awareness using this specific and exclusive object of awareness, the physicality of breathing in, the physicality of breathing out. But in no way does it require the body or the mind to become tight. Now, of course, there might be tightness, but you don't need to be tight in order to remember the sensations of breathing in, to be attentive to the sensations of breathing out. And we take it one half breath at a time. So really build on success, that relaxed and unwavering presence just through one in-breath or one out-breath. That's a real success. And the mind unifying around this simple task feels good. Notice that. The first step is to establish mindful awareness using the physicality of the breathing process. And the second step is to heighten our interest so that we begin to notice the length and quality of the breath. And that natural process of settling, the breath goes from being longer and a more ordinary quality to shorter and a more refined or subtle quality. This is quite natural as the body and mind settle down, as the qualities of the mind begin to unify here in the present moment. Then the breath becomes shorter and more subtle. Now, we're not trying to make that happen. We're just noticing whether the breath is longer, grosser, or shorter and more subtle. It's like a feedback mechanism that helps us discern the settling process. There's no need to be disappointed if it feels appropriate to take a deeper, longer breath at some point. Sometimes that kind of discharge or release is needed, and a deeper breath is just the ticket, something useful. And when or if the breathing process becomes more subtle and shorter, remember to relax and trust it. Trust the breathing process to really settle when it can. And at times it might even seem as though it's going to disappear altogether. So use that experience to even heighten the interest more, so that there's enough sensitivity to notice even the most refined, subtle breathing. And just in order to learn the map, we'll keep moving through the steps. So the Buddha writes or spoke, one trains oneself while breathing in, experiencing the whole body. One trains oneself while breathing out, experiencing the whole body. So we're opening up the field of attention now to include the totality of the body as we feel the breath coming in. Aware of the totality of the body, sitting body, as we feel the breath going out. So a more inclusive awareness of the body. You might notice that the attention wants to go to places where there's pain or discomfort, but cultivate an inclusive general sense of the sitting body and sustain that awareness, whole body awareness, through each inhalation, each exhalation. Including all the neutral sensations in the body. And you can even imagine the breath energy moving through the entirety of the body as it comes in and goes out. No corner, no place untouched by the awareness. The whole body touched by consciousness, awareness. And begin to notice, if you can, when you can, the calming effect of this generous whole body awareness. It's really the healing of the body-mind relationship. The heart is opening, including the body, in a generous and kind and wise way. No longer distracted, no longer in denial, no longer controlling the body, judging the body. So feel the calm in the body, feel it deepening and spreading as best you can. And remember, you can always use a meditation word if that helps. So for example, as you're breathing in, you could repeat the phrase calming the body, or just the word calm, calming. Same then as you breathe out. And it's really essential to train the heart to notice the good feeling as you're breathing in, aware of the whole body, aware of the calm. As you breathe out, aware of the whole body and the spreading, deepening calm. Just appreciating the healing way the mind is aware of the whole body. And this awareness, this generous awareness, is felt as being healing and calming. Keeping it in mind. And as the body, mind trusts more, you feel a greater, deeper relaxation of the body, calming of the body, settling. And the body is allowed to be. It's allowed to move. Sense of release through the body. And this healing in the body supports the mind recognizing the experience of joy. Joy is simply, it arises simply by recognizing that everything's in motion. There is this flow of the body and the mind. And that flow, that movement is delightful when the mind isn't neurotically trying to manage or control things. So see if you can notice, this is the fifth instruction now. One trains oneself breathing in, experiencing joy. This lightness of heart, this buoyant, joyful interest, everything moving, happening on its own. But it might begin in a very simple, faint, even nondescript way. It's just a sense of vibration or tingling or energy moving in an ordinary sense. But the wisdom attunes to the flow, the lightness, even a sense of effortlessness. And we keep joy in mind as we breathe in and breathe out. So remember, you can use that word joy as a meditation word, or the phrase experiencing joy, repeating it with each in-breath, each out-breath, just as a simple reminder. We're learning to be interested in that lightness, that brightness, that buoyancy of the heart, of the present moment, like an inner smile, energetic smile that begins to touch the whole body and mind. Just as we did with calm, we feel the spreading and deepening of that light and buoyant quality of joy, joyful interest. As we breathe in, as we breathe out. And we let it mature, develop into a more resonant, happiness, a more resonant ease of the heart, contentedness of the heart. The heart content to just be here, breathing in ease, ease of the heart, breathing out ease of the heart. So we're keeping in mind this contentedness as we breathe in, the ease of contentedness as we breathe out. And choosing to keep this quality in mind. Allowing the entire heart to be suffused with ease and contentment, sense of well-being as we breathe in and as we breathe out. Allowing the joy and the ease to have their effects, which allows the wisdom to see any mental activity, any thoughts, as just thoughts. So whatever mental activity that might come and go can be just viewed with some dispassion. We don't need to control the thinking mind. So the next step, the Buddha asks us to train the heart while breathing in to be aware of mental activity with dispassion. And while breathing out, awareness of all the mental activity with dispassion. It's just thoughts coming and going, feelings coming and going, perceptions, whatever. We don't have to be for or against the thoughts, no need to judge. In other words, the presence of ease and well-being and contentedness really changes how the mind relates to mental activity. It just has a lot more space, dispassionate space around the thoughts. Which supports a quieting of the mental activity. So this is the 8th step. The Buddha says one trains oneself while breathing in, noticing the quieting of mental activity. And train yourself while breathing out to notice the quieting of mental activity. And this happens naturally because we're relating to the thinking mind with dispassion from this place of well-being and contentment. So the thinking mind quiets naturally. So the next step, one trains oneself breathing in, experiencing the space of the mind, the space of the knowing mind. One breathes out, experiencing the space of the knowing mind. Not the activity, mental activity, but the space of the mind itself. As you breathe in, as we breathe out. Learning to keep in mind something which is very subtle. Not the body, not the activity of the mind, but the space of the knowing mind itself. As we're breathing in, as we're breathing out. And the next step is to learn to gladden and appreciate this silent, empty space, open space of the mind. Deep appreciation. There's something beautiful, even sacred, about the space of the heart, the empty, open, unstainable space of the heart, space of the present moment, here and now, noticing as we breathe in, noticing it as we breathe out, appreciating it as we breathe in and out, and allowing it to become more silent and open and still and empty of self or selfing. And sensing that this beautiful and free space of the heart is empty of self. Even the freedom is empty of self. It's just what it is. So take a few moments. You don't have to rush, just the body. So again, a big welcome to everyone. We're taking a few months to reflect and integrate the Buddha's teachings from the Anapanasati Sutta. That word Anapanasati means mindfulness of breathing in and out. And it uses the breath initially, as you saw in the guided meditation instructions, and many of you know now, as an exclusive object of awareness. But then most of the remaining 14 steps out of the 16 are really about that whole process of awakening. And we think about this as awakening to the body, the heart relating to the body, free from distractedness and free from unwholesome qualities. So we're being intimate with the body, with a mind that doesn't have greed or hatred, aversion, fear, or distractedness. So the sort of, when we get to the end of the fourth instruction, one trains oneself breathing in, calming the body, one breathes out, calming the body. It's really an expression of the well-being or the happiness of the mind and body, the mind knowing the body in a really simple and beautiful and healing way. And that is expressed, or that manifests in our subjective experiences, the body being really calm and settled. And I've been saying, it doesn't mean that all of our bodily injuries are suddenly gone. It just means the mind is relating to the body as it actually is in a way that's really beautiful. So what's beautiful isn't the body, it's the mind's opening to the body, intimacy with the body, acceptance of the body. That's really what allows the body to settle. It's just like when we're in community, whether it's our family or a bigger community, and we're feeling really held and accepted and not needing to be different than we are. And what do? We relax because we feel accepted and like we belong, right? Well, these relationships matter, including the mind, the way the mind is relating to the body. So that's the work of the first tetrad. Tetrad is just the word for the four, right? So the first four instructions, the first tetrad. The work is really this integration of body and mind and healing the way the mind knows the body. And really, the mind knowing the body is just how the mind learns to relate and show up for the wider world. If we have a neurotic relationship with our body, or if we tend not to be aware of our body, that pattern tends to express itself all over the place in our lives, where we're disconnected, or, if we have a controlling relationship with our body, the mind knows the body in a controlling, dominating way. That same habit then we tend to catch in other relationships in our world, in our lives. If we've given up on the relationship, that tends to be a pattern that shows up in other places in our lives. So then that brings us to the second set, and we talked about this last week. And let me talk a little bit about how the maturing of our first four instructions. So the first instruction isn't even considered the first instruction. It's, the Buddha says in this discourse, we establish mindfulness to the fore. I think the way I would sort of understand that is we remember what it is to be mindful. And don't think that's an easy task. It's something that we want to keep refining our whole path. What do we mean by being mindful? And so in a fresh way, so we're not on autopilot, we remember, okay, being mindful, being present means remembering, oh, it's like this now. We're remembering the present moment. We're remembering that this is being known. That's establishing mindfulness to the fore. And we're using the physicality of breathing as a support for remembering what mindfulness is. Oh yeah, breathing in is being known. Oh yeah, breathing out, that physicality, whether you're feeling it as a rising and falling of the abdominal wall, or you're feeling it as a touching in and out of the nostrils, or some other physical way that you feel that natural process of breathing in and breathing out, whatever works really. And like I've been saying, it doesn't even need to be the breath, although the breath is a traditional object that is useful for many, many folks, probably the great majority of folks who are interested in these teachings. But there are other ways for one to ground their awareness in the present moment. You can even just go right to whole body awareness if you've got a lot of emotional baggage around the breath, like if you've had a lot of breathing problems in your life through asthma or whatever it might be. So when we are good with the first four instructions and we have that experience of the mind relating to the body in a generous, kind, non-distracted, intimate way, then the body, to some degree at least, is experienced as a natural process, a natural happening. So since instead of the body sort of being fixed as a concrete thing, muscle, bones, flesh, right? Because that's mostly concept. The body is experienced as an energetic flow of sensation. And that can be a nice way for us to go to the fifth step. Because the second set of four, beginning with the fifth step, is really about transforming how the mind relates to mental activity. But we need some medicine in order to transform the way we relate to the thinking mind, to mental activity. And the medicine we need is the first two steps, where the Buddha is asking us to train ourselves to notice joy as we breathe in and out, and to notice ease as we breathe in and out. So the one way, there are many ways, and as you get more confident in what joy is, you can go directly there, because it's as if the mind knows where to find joy. We always think that I'm not joyful, and then when we have that imagining, we think joy is somewhere else, far away, maybe millions of miles away. And then that idea that we're identified with becomes a kind of reality. Joy will not be accessible. So we should change that idea and have a different idea, like there's always joy. I may not be aware of it. I may not have confidence in that idea, but I'm going to work with that idea that joy is never far away. Because joy is just, it's the mental experience that arises when wisdom understands how alive everything is, how unfixed everything is. So now going back to the fourth step, where we have this integration of body and mind, and the mind that knows, wisdom, is noticing that the body is really alive, because the mind isn't being parental to the body. It's holding, relating, being with the body in an open and non-fixed, non-distracted on the one hand, and non-controlling, not being a parent on the other hand. So the body is just expressing its nature, which is a flow of sensation, right? So when we notice that free flow in the body, notice the flow part of it, and that will lead to the mind beginning to feel some joy. Because it reminds the mind, it reminds wisdom how alive, how light, how free things can be. It's a little bit like, those games we played as kids where we'd spin or whatever we would do, even just running down a hill. There's something about the controlling mind giving up the task of control. And the mind begins to intuit how everything is happening on its own. Everything's a flow, a movement. So when we're ready to sort of learn the map and we're on the fifth step and we get that instruction, one trains oneself breathing in, experiencing joy. So the Buddha's asking, amongst all the things that awareness can pay attention to, choose to be attentive to the experience of joy as you breathe in, as you breathe out. So look in your energetic bodily experience, this is just one way, for that feeling of things being unfixed. And really tune into that sense of vibration or movement or flow or tingling or whatever it might be, wherever you might feel it in the body and mind, a lightness, a fluttering, a movement. And just keep that sense of lightness and flow and things happening on their own. Keeping it in mind as you breathe in, just for that duration. Then again, as you're breathing out, just for that duration, keeping it in mind, keep it in mind. Because the more we respect joy enough to keep it in mind, the more we start noticing it more and more. So that's the spreading and the deepening of joy. So what's the problem here? Well, what will often arise, especially in the beginning, is some doubt, like, there isn't any joy. I must be doing something wrong, or it works for other people, but not for me. And what does the practicing mind do? It pays attention to the thought, I can't do this. But by paying attention to the thought and identifying with the thought, I can't do this, well, that has some consequence, right? The mind gets entangled with that belief. And we're not going to find joy in that belief. We're going to find tension, right? Because what we pay attention to, how we pay attention to that object, it matters. So this is where persistence comes in. Whether you feel like a total failure, just keep picking up the task. Oh, the Buddha's asking me to train myself that while I'm breathing in, do your best to keep in mind joy. While you're breathing out, do your best to keep in mind joy. Now, if you really feel like you can't do this, then go back to one of the earlier steps. You can go back to the first step, just establishing mindfulness to the fore. The second place where we're noticing, going from gross, longer breaths to shorter breaths as everything settles, to that more inclusive awareness of the whole body, to the calming effect in the body. Right? You can always go back to one of those earlier steps, develop the momentum there, and then see if there's enough confidence to attune to some joy as you're breathing in, breathing out. And then the ease is just a more resonant, it's like a more satisfying happiness than the joy is. And it's like that almost visceral sense of contentment being tasted. I don't really need to go anywhere because this experience of well-being appears to be satisfying enough to relax that sense I got to get somewhere in order to be satisfied. That's what we mean by noticing the contentedness of ease. It's that sense of don't need to get anywhere or go anywhere. So we're attuning to that as we're breathing in and breathing out. And then as that matures, as that spreads and deepens, then quite naturally the mind's going to relate to other phenomena like the thinking, the mental activity with a lot of dispassion. Because now I'm not using my thinking mind to try to get someplace satisfactory, someplace where there's some contentment and ease, because the body, heart, mind feels established in ease. So then it gazes out or in at whatever is moving, mental activity, whatever it might be, because the mental activity has its own momentum. We're going to keep worrying, thinking, imagining, planning based on whatever momentum the thinking mind has. And we don't need to neurotically repress the thinking mind. We can just notice thinking is thinking in this dispassionate way. Oh yeah, that's what the thinking mind does, it thinks. And this is a real breakthrough where we realize that thinking doesn't have to be turned into a problem. And then lo and behold, this is the 8th step now, One trains oneself, breathing in, notice the quieting of the mind, the quieting of mental activity. Breathing out, notice the quieting of the thinking mind, mental activity. And the quieting is the natural result of being intimate with thinking, with dispassion. Not suppressing the thinking, but letting thinking just be thinking. But we're not feeding it with our identification, our attachment to the thoughts. It's just like someone's left a radio on and there's thinking. Oh, okay, thinking. And we can do that because we did the first two jobs well. We really learned how to keep joy in mind so that it could spread and deepen. And then we learned how to keep in mind a more resonant happiness, sukha, ease, contentment, until it started to spread and deepen. And that really creates a kind of well-being for the body and mind, which allows it to be dispassionate towards other activity, bodily activity, mental activity, sounds, sights, whatever. It's just because I'm okay being where I'm at. I don't need to use my thinking mind to figure something out, get somewhere. So with the quieting, with the first, we really are healing the body-mind relationship and healing the habit of distractedness. Like, I don't even want to be connected to my body. So we get addicted to being caught up in stuff because we don't want to come home to the body because it doesn't feel good. And here with the first four, we really learn how to be with the body in a beautiful, open, holistic way. And the body responds by settling and being calm. Then we look at mental activity from the perspective of feeling joy and ease with dispassion. And we really heal the relationship of the wisdom, the knowing mind, with mental activity. And we see mental activity as just another natural process that we can let it be what it is. And it tends to quiet down and settle. And we feel the happiness of a quiet mind, of a settled mind. Just like in the first four, we felt the happiness of a settled body. Now we're feeling the happiness of a settled mind. And that allows wisdom to recognize not the activity of the mind, but the space of the knowing mind itself. And obviously this is much more subtle work. And in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll really emphasize the next tetrad, the next 4 instructions. I'll just go through it quickly now. One trains oneself breathing in, experiencing the mind or the space of the mind. Breathing out, experiencing the mind, the space of the mind. And then the next one is gladdening. So again, one trains oneself breathing in, gladdening, appreciating the space of the mind, space of the heart. One breathes out, gladdening, appreciating the space of the heart. It's almost like it's such a, like in terms of Buddha's teachings, it's a real deepening of self-esteem, to use a sort of Western psychological term, because we realize there's something here and now, turns out not to be personal, but it's still here and now that is truly beautiful, truly worthy of appreciation. And that's the space of the mind, not a particular thought or even a particular emotion, but just the silent, open, unblemished, unstained space of the present moment, space of the heart. You know, words are never going to be so good here. This is something that we can directly open, intuit, rest in even. And that's really what the third set of 4 instructions are about. Recognizing the space of the mind, appreciating it. And then in a way we're purifying it. We're noticing the space and we're, in a sense, teasing out any ownership, any selfing with that space of the present moment, the space of the knowing mind. We're seeing it as it is in all of its simplicity. without any projection. This is me. I'm aware. We don't need that personal pronoun. There's awareness. There is this space. And I don't need to add anything to my actual experience. I don't need to claim it. That just creates a little distortion. We're really learning to rest, to trust the space of the mind. So the third part of that, recognizing, appreciating, the third part is really what is the word here? I guess they translate it as concentrating, but you could say purifying or stilling the space of the mind so that it's empty of any selfing, any idea of self, because it doesn't need an idea of self. And then that really sets up the letting go, a taste of the mind, an experiencing of the mind, absence of any selfing. What is the experience of this heart, space of the heart, space of the present moment, when selfing has ceased? What's that experience? Well, we should be interested in that, even if we don't know or even have any intuition or even that much intellectual understanding of what these words point to. We just do our best because it's a natural process that unfolds when we recognize, appreciate, quiet, really keep in mind the emptiness of that space of the present moment. Then we realize something. This moment, this space of the mind, isn't dependent on any selfing, doesn't require any selfing. That's a big insight, to realize that this moment doesn't require a sense of self. And it changes the mind stream, our life, as it goes forward, each time that insight deepens. So that's where we'll be going in the next few weeks. And I wanted to end today just to suggest that for those of you who are going to stay for the small groups today, one thing to really learn from each other about is wise effort. Like, how do I persist in each of these? We're just talking about the first 3 sets of instruction, each set having 4 instructions. So when we're working with the body, working with mental activity, working with the space of the mind, what does wise effort, wise, skillful, gentle, but persistent effort look like? And when does effort get too tight and not helpful? And when does my effort get too lax and not helpful? And how can I sort of increase the effort, the energy, and how can I relax it so we can get it just right? So much, especially at this level of practice, is about balance, which means we're going to get, either from ourselves or from a teacher, we're going to get instructions that, are going to say, go a little this way or go a little that way. Because the instruction, the medicine we need will always be based on how we're off. So if we're leaning in my case, to the left, then we need instructions that say, go to the right. And if we're leaning to the right, we need instructions that say, go to the left. If we're too tight with our efforting, we need to remind ourselves to relax and trust. It's a natural process. If we're too lax, we need to remind ourselves to be interested, to connect, to follow the instruction, to find where we might connect with an instruction, and to really give ourselves to that instruction. Because this whole awakening process, although it's a natural process, it won't happen on its own, because the mind has its habits of distractedness and superficiality. So in a perfect world, we'd be free, but we're not free. We're caught up in unhelpful habits of mind, to be distracted, to be disconnected, to relate with greed, with aversion and fear, and with denial and distraction. So because we have these established habits, there are these instructions. If we didn't have bad habits, we wouldn't need the Buddha's instructions. So remember that the Buddha's instructions aren't sort of for enlightened beings. They're for people who have bad habits of greed, of aversion and fear, of distractedness and denial and superficiality. Greed, hatred, and delusion is sort of the short version of our habit energies. So then we basically are given instructions that are counterbalancing the habits of the mind. So keep that in mind in terms of effort. And then just a lot of patience. I don't know if I mentioned this before. I know I mentioned some of what was in that article from Ajahn Sumedho in his little book, Now is the Knowing. And he has a chapter on the Buddhist teachings on mindfulness of breathing. And in there, he writes about a child, like, we have to learn to walk by falling down. And he gives that example of babies when they're learning to walk, falling down all the time. But they don't give up, and we don't encourage them to give up. Oh, you know what? I think it's just going to be too hard for you. You don't really need to learn to walk. No, we kind of create bridges so they can keep on keeping on. And this is goes to the heart of what persistence is. These 16 instructions, and I pasted them at the beginning of the chat so you can find them there. And they're in the weekly email, all the resources if you want to do some study, but you might want at least a list of the 16 steps so you can memorize them and realize them in your own heart and mind, in your own experience. So then it's just like we get this pointing out instruction, we can keep knocking on that door, going back over and over again, and really learn, like, when we hold to the instruction too tightly, trying too hard, being too parental, then we just remember some version of, honey, it's okay to relax. And when we're not attentive enough to the instruction, not devoted enough, not interested in what does this instruction point to in my actual experience, then we want to remind ourselves, honey, I think you gotta, if you want to get anywhere, you have to show some real devotion. You have to really get interested. You have to be willing to make mistakes and learn from them. Because whether we don't learn from success, we make mistakes initially because we don't quite get what the verbal instruction is pointing to in our subjective experience. So we take a shot at it and we realize, no, that's not it. That's going in the direction of more tension, more controlling, or whatever. And we refine it. We try something else and we'll get it. Let me just read this paragraph to end today. This is again from Ajahn Sumedho, this Western Buddhist monk, one of our elders in our early Buddhist tradition here in the West. He wrote this little booklet, Now is the Knowing. And it's one of the resources in that set of resources. The more we take the easy way, the path of least resistance, the more we just follow our desires, the more the mind becomes sloppy, heedless, and confused. It's easy to think, easier to sit and think all the time than to not think. It's a habit we've acquired. Even the thought, I shouldn't think, is just another thought. To avoid thought, we have to be mindful of it, to put forth effort by watching and listening, by being attentive to the flow in our minds. Rather than thinking about our minds, we watch it. Rather than getting caught in thoughts, we keep recognizing them. This is really that place, seventh instruction, where we're looking at thoughts with dispassion in the second set of 4 instructions. Thought is movement. It is energy. It comes and goes. It's not a permanent condition of mind. Without evaluating or analyzing, when we simply recognize thought as thought, it begins to slow down and stop. This isn't annihilation. This is allowing things to cease. It is compassion. As the habitual obsessive thinking begins to fade, great space we never knew were there begins to appear. And that's what sets up the 9th instruction, experiencing the space of the mind. So please stay along. I'm forgetting now if it's Nancy or Shannon today who will be organizing the small groups.